Thank you. So I've had 4 careers, which I'll tell you about chronologically and also in order of success. The first one, I was president of TriStar Pictures and executive vice president of MGM, and my job was to market movies, which means anything having to do with advertising or promotion or publicity was my responsibility. I was the least successful marketing person in the history of Hollywood. I buried more movies than any other 5 marketing people combined. And we're not talking about small movies with nobodies, stars in them. I mean, Tom Hanks, who has more $100 million movies than anyone ever. I had 3 Tom Hanks movies, all of which died. Every Time We Say Goodbye, Volunteers, and Nothing in Common. If you've seen any of these, just jump in, okay? Arnold Schwarzenegger, I buried Red Heat and Running Man. Bruce Willis, Sunset and Blind Date. Meryl Streep, Still of the Night. Francis Ford Coppola, Gardens of Stone. George Lucas and Jim Henson, who are arguably, along with Walt Disney, 2 of the top 3 names in family entertainment ever. Lucas and Henson collaborated on a movie that I killed. Lucas produced it and Henson directed it. It was called Labyrinth. You saw Labyrinth? There you go. You're one of very few people, believe me. That'll do you no good at cocktail parties to say that. I wasn't even good at the one thing you have to be good at in marketing, which is to find excuses for why your movies failed. We had a movie called Gabby, G-A-B-Y, which was actually a really good movie, and it was a true story. It starred Norma Alejandro, who got an Academy Award nomination, and she played a woman who had such a debilitating disease that she could only move one leg, and she typed novels with her foot. This is really a true story, and it was a terrific movie. And there's more people in this room than saw it on opening weekend. And I came in that Monday, and of course the movie had died, and I said, oh, of course, who's going to go see a depressing movie about a woman who only can type with one foot? About 6 months later, My Left Foot came out, right? Which was the same exact story, starring Daniel Day-Lewis, and it made a fortune. So I'll just tell 2 quick stories about why I came to dislike the movie business, and that is, it is so self-centered that all anybody cares about is the movie. And it becomes so insular that it's really bothersome. But I had a meeting one night with Arnold Schwarzenegger, and he was in a movie for us called Red Heat. And Red Heat was about, Schwarzenegger comes as a Russian cop to Chicago, and he meets Jimmy Belushi in Chicago, who's a cop, and they go off and fight crime together. Okay, that's the short story. So the next morning, he's going to go on Good Morning America for us. And I'm going to try and coach him on what to say. He says, don't worry about it. No matter what they ask me, I will talk about Red Heat. And he was actually annoyed that he had seen Stallone. We had Stallone in Rambo. And he had seen Stallone on the same show, and Stallone was diverted and didn't talk about his movie. And Schwarzenegger said, there's nothing they can ask me that I won't talk about this movie. And he said, try me. So I said, Arnold, how much did you weigh when you were born? And he said, it's funny you asked me that. I weighed 7.5 pounds. And when my mother came to the set of Red Heat, she said, Arnold, look at you. You were such a little baby, and now you play this big Russian cop who comes to Chicago, right? So we had a movie called Amazing Grace and Chuck. I'm sure you've all seen it, right? It was an awful movie about a kid in Montana who refused to play Little League Baseball until the world was free of nuclear weapons. Really classic work. Anyway, so real-life sports stars see his story, and they join him in a boycott of all sports. All pro sports shuts down, and they're all crusading for nuclear disarmament. And by the end of the movie, Gregory Peck played the president. Okay, I think it was his last movie. I think he died of embarrassment shortly thereafter. But he played the president, and at the end of the movie, Peck and the Russian premier are sitting in Montana eating peanuts, watching this kid play Little League Baseball with the world free of nuclear weapons. Okay, it was horrible. But a year before it came out, we were in a production meeting and we're talking about the movie, and this was 1986. And the production executive was saying that he spoke to Gregory Peck, who was friends with Reagan at the time, who was president, and Peck thought that Reagan, as his crowning achievement in office, was going to negotiate a nuclear arms agreement. So the executive was worried that maybe we should release the movie sooner, because how would it be to have a movie about getting rid of nuclear weapons if there aren't any? Right? So we talk about this, and then I go back to my office to tell my staff what was said. And I'm telling this story, and a young woman gets up, and she says, wait, let me understand this. We're worried that the world will be free of nuclear weapons because of the effect it'll have on Amazing Grace and Chuck, right? But that's what it's like. It's just so insular. But anyway, after decades of failure, I left the movie business. And trust me, there were no actors and directors hanging onto my ankles begging me to stay. And I wrote a script, and the script sold. So now I'm a screenwriter. And I sold about 10 feature scripts, and none of them got made. You can be a successful writer in Hollywood. I really wasn't, but you can be one without ever getting a movie made. But what happens when you're a screenwriter is, when you're a B-level screenwriter like I was, is they look for reasons not to make your movie, okay? Because they don't want to look bad. If you hire Aaron Sorkin to write your movie and it fails, the executive says, what do you want from me? I got the best. I got Aaron Sorkin. If you hire David Rosenfelt and it fails, you got problems, right? So what happens is they buy the script and then they just torture you with changes until they drop the movie. So one day I was in a meeting where they were giving me notes, things to do to my script. And I knew they were looking to get out of the movie altogether, and they were torturing me about the credibility, how everything had to make perfect sense. Now, basically I agree with that, but they were taking it to an extreme, and it was really driving me crazy. So that night, I go to see a movie called The River Wild. Anybody see that? It wasn't one of ours, so you probably all saw it, right? And a friend of mine produced it. And it's a movie where Meryl Streep plays a whitewater rafting expert out with her family, her kids and her wimpy husband, who has no understanding of the outdoors. And they're going down this raging river, and Kevin Bacon is an escaped convict, and he takes the family prisoner, because Meryl Streep is the only person that's able to get him down this raging river. Okay? About a quarter of the way into the movie, the wimpy husband escapes, and he spends the rest of the movie, he goes down the side and he sets a trap for them for when they finally get there. So, having been tortured by credibility that day, I'm watching this movie and I'm thinking, if the wimpy accountant husband can walk down the side and get to the end, why does Kevin Bacon need Meryl Streep to get him down the raging river, right? But, so it drove me totally nuts. So a friend of mine is a big-time TV producer, director, and he got me to write a movie for television. And I was home. Movies for TV are my perfect environment because you have to have no artistic integrity whatsoever, right? You just write whatever they tell you and cash a check. I literally wrote a thriller about postpartum depression, right? So I wrote 3 TV movies. I wrote 10 TV movies, but 3 of them got made. The first 2 were mediocre at best. The third one was a complete train wreck. It was a Canadian low-budget movie. So it's called Deadly Isolation. It's about a woman who lives on the coast of Maine, coincidentally, and her husband had died 2 years earlier, and she's still mourning him, and it's just she and her 10-year-old golden retriever. And there's going to be a political regatta off the coast, so somebody comes there and pretends to be a friend of her dead husband, and he wants to spend a few weeks at her house. He pretends to be injured because he's going to commit an assassination at this regatta, and he wants to be in place before security gets there. So Lifetime Network buys a script, but they don't want it to be a political assassination movie. They want the bad guy and the dead husband to have been jewel thieves together, and the husband died before he could split the jewels from the latest robbery. And this guy's going to come there and scam this woman because he thinks the jewels are in the house. I said, that's fine, but if I were that guy, instead of spending 3 weeks scamming the woman and getting her to fall in love with him, I would just tie her up and search the house. All right? But they wanted to do it their way, and that was fine with me. I didn't care. So they did it as a low-budget movie, and there was one scene in the script where the guy, the woman, and the dog go out on her boat on the ocean, and he's trying to get the woman to fall for him. So when she's not looking, he throws her dog into the ocean so that he can jump in and save it and look good in her eyes, right? This is clever stuff. But they didn't have the money to go out on the ocean. So they went on what was like a viaduct. It was like as wide as this thing, right? And they used a Bernese Mountain Dog for some reason, which was fine. But anyway, the guy throws the dog into the water, and the dog is swimming happily along, right? And the guy's desperate to try and catch the dog. It's just horrible, right? So one day I decided I wanted to write a movie about a legal drama, a courtroom drama. And they weren't making them in TV movies then, they're still not. So I wrote 50 pages as a novel. And then I had to get finished to go to do a TV movie, and I gave the 50 pages to my wife to read, and if she didn't like it, I wouldn't even have finished it. I mean, it was like a whim. And she liked it, so I finished it, and I sent it to my film agent, who sent it to a book agent, who sent it to one publisher, and they bought it with 4 sequels. And the whole process took, from the time I started writing, it took maybe 6 weeks to the time they bought it. So now as a novelist, right? And I had so little idea what I was doing that I didn't know I had written a series until they bought sequels. And I didn't even know I had written a mystery until they assigned it to their publishing division called Mysterious Press. I thought I had written a courtroom drama. I thought that was a genre. So the book was called Open and Shut, and it comes out, and it gets very well received. And one day I get an email that I've been nominated for the Gumshoe Award, Best First Novel. So I forwarded that email to every human being in America, right? You got it. You may have deleted it, but you got it. And then I'm Googling my name, right, which I do every 20 minutes. I mean, I think this is the longest I've gone without Googling my name in 3 months, right? So I send it, so I'm into one of these chat rooms or something, but it's not live, like I'm reading what had been said. And somebody had said that he's in charge of getting nominees for the Gumshoe Award. And he can think of 4 to use for Best First Novel. Can anybody think of a 5th? And somebody answers, there's a book called Open and Shut. I'm not sure who wrote it. He said, fine, I'll use that, right? So that's how I got nominated. I didn't win. But it got other nominations, and it was very well received. And then I wrote a book called First Degree, which was the second in the series. And it was where my lack of artistic integrity first surfaced. In novel land, they take stuff really seriously. So they sent me a book jacket, and the book jacket showed a guy on a bridge looking down, like at the murder site. except that's not in the book, right? So I said, I'll put it in the book, right? Why don't I said, I don't care where the murder takes place. Why don't I write that in, right? You would think I was like tampering with the Mona Lisa. So that book was well received. Then Bury the Lead came out, and that's probably the weakest of the books. But it did pretty well because it was a Today Show book of the month. So Janet Ivanovich went on the show with me, and she was really nice. So that was okay. Then I wrote Sudden Death, which might be my favorite. And what happens in Sudden Death at the end is his girlfriend goes off to her hometown in Wisconsin. She moves to Wisconsin. So book 5, called Dead Center, Andy goes to Wisconsin to handle a case, and she's there because she's there. So I write the whole book set in northern Wisconsin, and the plot, I won't bore you with the whole details because I don't even remember it, but at the end, it involves smuggling stuff across the border from Canada into Wisconsin. So I write the book and I give it to the publisher, and I say, while you read it, I'm going to get real town names off a map in northern Wisconsin and substitute them for the town names that I have in my book. So I look at a map and I find out that there is no border between Canada and Wisconsin, right? Wisconsin is bordered by Lake Superior, Michigan, and Minnesota, right? So I say to the publisher, well, let's move them to Minnesota, right? But Laurie had moved to Wisconsin in the 4th book, so God forbid they should have her now in Minnesota, right? So I had to change the whole story. Now they had to fly the stuff across Lake Superior. I had to make the bad guy a pilot. I had to put a little airfield in a stupid town. And I got creative, and I had Andy solve the crime. Something had to do with they didn't file a flight plan. So the book comes out, and I get 400 emails from pilots telling me you don't have to file a flight plan, right? So I was going to write one more book in the Andy series called Play Dead. And it was the first book. Andy has a golden retriever, and it was the first book in which there was a dog that was central to the story. And they put a golden retriever on the cover. And the book was a smash. By my standards, it was an absolute smash. It sold twice as many as any previous book. And everybody would write to me and say, listen, I'm embarrassed, but I only bought it because there was a dog on the cover, right? I could care less why they bought it, right? So I agreed to write another one. And I'll talk more about this later, but I don't come up with the stories in advance. I just write, and it goes wherever it goes. So the publisher sends me the book jacket and title for the 7th book before I even knew what the book was going to be about. And it had 2 dogs on the cover, right? It had a golden and a Bernese mountain dog. So I actually wrote the book to the cover, right? Which I don't think is how Hemingway used to do it, you know? So that book did pretty well. And so now, if I rewrote the Manhattan Telephone Directory, it would have a dog on the cover. So after that, I wrote, I don't know what I wrote, Dog Tags, a series of books, Dog Tags Unleashed, and One Dog Night or something, I don't know. And then Hounded was the last one, and it's actually a pretty good one of these books. Like, you know, they have varying degrees of quality. It's a pretty good one, and there's like a major change in Andy's life in this book. So it has more sensitivity to it, which is not my forte, right? And then the next one in the series is called Who Let the Dog Out? And that'll be out July 21st. I also write, I should have said one thing. I also make ridiculous mistakes in my books, and they happen all the time. In New Tricks, the book with 2 dogs on the cover, Laurie is shot in the thigh, and she almost bleeds to death. And it was based on, there was a Washington Redskin player named Sean Taylor who actually died that way around that time. But anyway, so Laurie's shot in its thigh, and she almost bleeds to death. And I wrote that the reason she bled so much from the bullet in her thigh was that it The bullet severed her carotid artery, right? And that's literally in the book, right? So I do dumb stuff like that all the time. But anyway, about 6 years ago, I decided one book a year is like, it takes me 6 weeks to write a book, so it leaves me some free time. So I wrote a book called Don't Tell a Soul. And that's what they call a standalone, which has different characters, and all new characters. And that book had a beauty of a mistake in it. At the beginning of the book, the story is about a guy our hero goes to a bar on New Year's Eve, and somebody comes up to him in the bar and says, a stranger, and says, I murdered a woman named Sheila. Her body is buried here at this particular place in Kinnelon, New Jersey. Don't tell us. He says, can you keep it secret? And he tells about Sheila in Kinnelon. So the title of the book was Can You Keep a Secret? And I thought that sounded like a Lifetime movie of the week. So at the last minute, we changed the title to Don't Tell a Soul. So I rewrote the scene. So instead of the guy saying, can you keep a secret now, when he tells him about Sheila and Kinnelon, he says, don't tell a soul. In the rewriting at the last minute, I left out the name Sheila. So the next morning, our guy goes home and he's Googling Sheila murder, Kinnelon, New Jersey, for no reason, because the guy never mentioned Sheila, right? Anyway, that book did okay. Then I wrote a book called Down to the Wire, which is mediocre at best. Then I wrote something called On Borrowed Time. And On Borrowed Time shows an example of my biggest problem, which is an inability to think ahead and know, I can't lay the story out in advance. On Borrowed Time, I wrote 50 pages, and I sold a publisher based on the 50 pages. And they were probably the best 50 pages I've ever written. And they were, I'll try and tell as fast. It's a story of a guy who meets a woman in New York City. They fall in love. They live together for 6 months. He wants to marry her. They go up to her parents' house in upstate New York, where he's going to propose. And they spend 4 wonderful days with her parents. He proposes. She says yes. They go around the town. They meet all their friends. It's great. The last day when they're going to leave, he goes for a drive with her up to see a waterfall or something. And it starts to get cloudy and stormy. And it gets darker and darker. And it gets so dark that the lights of the car can't pierce the darkness. And the car goes into a ditch and rolls over. And when it gets light, and when he looks, she's gone. And they can't find her, and the police come, and they can't find her, and he figures maybe she got disoriented and went back to her house. So he goes back to her house, and her mother comes out and says, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't have a daughter, and you were never here. And they go around to the town, and everybody they spent the last 4 days with says, there's no such person. I never saw you before, and there's no such woman. He goes back to New York. All of the friends they met over the last 6 months say the same thing. There's no such woman. There's no evidence in his apartment that she was ever there. The jeweler denies ever selling him a ring. The woman never existed, and it's too big to be a conspiracy, right? Too many people would be involved. So that's where the pages end. And I say to the publisher, and the publisher buys it, and I say, and because the publisher publishes thrillers, I say, it won't be a science fiction ending. Well, now what? I was completely stuck. I had no idea how to end this book. So for like 3 months, I couldn't write another page because I didn't know what to do. So that's the downside of not knowing where it's going. So in book 4, it was called Heart of a Killer. And it was a story of I really liked the story. It was a woman who was in prison, and her daughter, 14-year-old daughter on the outside, had a congenital heart defect and needed a transplant. And the woman in prison was the only perfect match for her daughter. And the woman in prison wanted to give her daughter her heart, killing herself in the process. And the state wouldn't do it. And this lawyer comes, and the only way he can let her do this is by getting her out of prison. So he has to reopen her case, and it becomes a thriller, right? So about 6 months after the book comes out, I'm having dinner in Maine with these people we met, and the guy is like a renowned hematologist at Johns Hopkins. And he was a nice guy. He read the book the day before, and he says, I don't know how to tell you this, but you don't have to be a perfect match to do a heart transplant. He said, it's not even important. He said, and if it was important, it wouldn't be the mother. It would be a sibling. So the entire premise of the book was bullshit, right? It was totally, I mean, the other stuff, the other stupid mistakes are little things. This was the entire premise of the book. So the fifth book was called Airtight, and I like Airtight a lot. There's one line in Airtight where I say that they found the victim lying face down on his back. All right? All right. Yeah. But other than that, it was a pretty good book. And book 6 was Without Warning. And the only stupid mistake in that is I created this Maine town, a town in Maine that I didn't think existed, and I had it flooded out by a dam breaking. And like 2 days before the book's going to come out, and it's called Wilton, Maine. And I looked up, and it was no such place. But I must not have looked hard enough, because 2 days before it's going to come out, our local paper talked about a Wilton guy who won a gold medal in the Olympics. Right? So I had, and it doesn't have a dam, it doesn't, not even near water, but about 2 years ago, I wrote a book called Dog Tripping. And dog tripping is, I'll just backtrack a little. My wife and I had a great dog named Tara in California, a golden retriever. And when she died, it was like this transforming experience for us. And we started volunteering at a shelter. And the shelters in Southern California are just beyond horrible, okay? And it became very passive watching these dogs either be put down or go to bad homes, you know, where they're going to be guard dogs and stuff like that. So we're in a shelter one day, and this guy comes in with his 3 kids, like 10 years old in that area, and they're turning in their dog to the shelter. And when you turn a dog into the shelter in Baldwin Park, California, you have to sign a piece of paper saying you understand the dog can be put down after an hour, okay? Because it wasn't a stray, so they don't have to wait for the owner to show up, right? So he signs the paper, and my wife and I are there, and we overhear him talking about that they had gotten this dog, it was a lab mix. They had gotten a dog from the shelter 10 months earlier as a puppy. Now he's a year old. He's full grown. He's not cute anymore. So they're getting rid of him. And they're going into the back to get a puppy, all right? So my wife, Debbie, went absolutely insane on this guy in the lobby, right? I mean, I was like, you know, off to the side. She's destroying this guy in front of his kids. So they left. They didn't get a dog, but I'm sure they came back and did. So we rescued that dog, and that became our first rescue. And so we rescued about 4,000 dogs. And if a dog, and we placed them in homes, but if a dog was ill or blind or old or epileptic or whatever, when we rescued them, you know, where they're going to go? We're not going to find a home for them, and we're not going to keep them in a cage, so they came home as our dog. And it sort of builds up when you get to 25, and they call and say, you know, getting a third one, if you have 2, is a big deal. If you have 25 and they call and say that there's a 9-year-old golden that they're going to put down at 3 o'clock, if you don't get there, you go to 26. So we're psychotic dog people. So we got as high as 42, as I said last night. Anything over 40 we consider eccentric, you know? So anyway, so after, in I think 2008, our house was caught in the fires in Southern California, and we had just bought a house in Maine, which we would ultimately move to when my wife retired. And there's like a dog subculture out there, and we were in a hotel thinking we lost a house. So I asked, somebody wrote to me from back east who I didn't know, who was in dog rescue, and said, "Are you guys okay in the fire?" And I said, "No, I think we lost a house." And did they have any idea how we'd moved 27 dogs from California to Maine? And they didn't know, but they must have put out on the internet, because over the next 3 days, we got 171 emails from people telling us that if we go through their town, we could stay at their house. with 27 dogs. Like if you come through Topeka, you guys can stay here. It was amazing. And the house didn't burn down. It's unfortunate that it didn't because my wife had a very big media job, and MTV was going to film our trip as a reality show. Right? So I would have been a star if the house had burned down. But anyway, so in 2011, we decided we were going to do this. We were going to actually move. And we wound up, we got 11 volunteers, readers, who I didn't even know for the most part, who flew in from all over the country to California. And we moved on 3 RVs, 25 dogs and 11 people. And it was just awful, right? I mean, and it's so frustrating because the other 10 people, if you ask them, they tell you it's the greatest adventure of their life, including Debbie. And I'm telling you, it was terrible. When you stop on a highway with 25 dogs, you can't just let them out to go to the bathroom, right? And these are old, arthritic dogs. We had to take 250 feet of plastic fencing, unroll it, and set up our own dog parks every time we had to let them off. And every time we stopped, they wanted to get off. And if you've ever driven an RV, and I never will again, every 20 minutes you have to stop for gas, right? I mean, you fill it up with gas, you turn on the thing, you drive 20 feet, I say, how much we got left? We have a quarter of a tank, right? We spent $450 every time we stopped for gas, to the point where the credit card company thought, something going on, so they cut off the credit. So I called American Express, and I explained what was going on, we told them we're moving from California to Maine. They wanted to switch us to their international department, right? So anyway, these people took a week out of their lives, these volunteers. It was arduous. There was no sleep. It was just terrible, right? But it was so selfless what they did and so amazing that it sort of taught me a lesson. Never volunteer for anything, I'm telling you. It was the worst. And now when the anniversary of it comes around, they're all emailing, their reminiscences of it and sending pictures. I don't know. I mean, I'm an RV half-empty type of guy, but this was really terrible. But its effect on my career was terrific. It came out the same day as an Andy book called Unleashed. And it sold more than any book I ever had, and the Andy book sold 40% more than the previous Andy book. And it was only because this opened up new readers, a nonfiction book. And this Andy book, Hounded, sold 40% more than that one did. So, because I have absolutely no integrity, I decided to write a sequel to Dog Tripping, right? But I wrote it without the trip. So there's a book called Lessons from Tara, and it talks about our time in rescue and supposedly what the dogs taught me. Stuff like, if you want to get a date, walk around with a rescue dog. I wish I knew that 30 years ago. I'm telling you, it's a killer. They come up to you. I'm sitting with a dog. They come up to you at Starbucks, right? Women come up to you and talk to you. This is something I never experienced before. So it's too late for me, but I figure there'll be like 4 or 5 young single men who'll read this book, and then there'll be help for them. So anyway, that's my story. I have 3 books coming out this year. I have the 2 I told you about, and a book called Blackout. And I've just told you all I know about Blackout, okay? I haven't started it. It's going to come out in December, so it's due really soon. And I have to start writing it. What's that? They do have a cover. It's actually, they actually do have a cover. The covers for Lessons with Tara and Who Let the Dog Out are really nice. The cover for Blackout is sort of like generic thriller cover, which makes sense because they have no idea what it's about either, right? So, but it's called Blackout. And next year, I think I'm only going to write an Andy book. I've run out of dog stuff, I mean, I write, you have to do a book has to be a certain number of words. So I'm running low here, right? So I write the book, and it's like if I say, I came to the Clinton Library to speak. If that was what I was writing in a book, I would change that to, I got in my car, I drove over to the Clinton Library, and I walked in to speak, right? Because that's another like 10 words, you know? And you signed, a book has to be 75,000 words. So if you see fluff in the books, it means I was struggling to get words. So anyway, that's my story. Thank you for having me. Thank you. Did I do the right time?
By the time you do some questions, we got about 7 or 8 minutes to do questions.
Did I go over?
And then,
I went over?
I'll let you do.
Did I go over?
No, you're good.
Okay. Yes?
How come your editors never caught those mistakes?
Yeah, I had the same question.
Repeat the question if you would.
How come the editors never caught the stupid mistakes? And I've left out a few beauties, by the way. I don't know. And they'll find the smallest things. Like I referred to a diner in New Jersey, the Coach House Diner, and I had it as 2 words, and they corrected it. No, they checked, it's 1 word. But they didn't check where the carotid artery was, right? So, I don't know. I can only assume that they catch 50 of them, and the 51st they miss. All right, so. Anybody else?
Yes, please. Okay, so, you have the title for Blackout, but I'm interested if you came up with it or did the publisher come up with it? Because they're doing the cover. Are they giving you the title, or are you coming up with the title?
I came up with that title. Because I think it's going to be something about amnesia, right? Like a cop gets shot or something. So I came up with that title. But generally, I mean, it's a collaborative effort. I happen to come up with that one. Generally, they do. I mean, they're better at it than I am. So generally, they do. This one I did, but.
So, okay, so if they're coming up with the title, let's say, how is it that you are able to then write the book? I mean, for instance, you have somebody else's title, which is their idea. Am I correct on that? Or you're? No,
this one happened to be my title, but it could have been theirs.
Yeah.
That doesn't matter.
But in this case, it's yours. But,
yeah.
How are you coming up with the book, I guess, is my question.
If you read the book, you'll know it's not that big a deal. All right. I don't know. It just goes where it goes. I wish I could think of it in a look ahead, because it would be so much easier. It's like exhausting to not know where it's going. If I had an outline, I could write a book in a week. But the only time I slow down is if I don't know what should happen next. But when people say that they know who the bad guy was on page 250, I didn't know who the bad guy was on page 250, literally. Yes?
Do you have a notebook or something where you write down ideas that might occur to you? You're in the car and you say,
No.
hey,
No. Not even close. Mostly because ideas really don't occur to me. No, they literally don't. Like, I can't tell you where an idea comes from. It just happens while I'm sitting there and I just write it. But when I'm not writing, I never think about the books. I really don't.
Do you have a plan for the Andy Carpenter series as far as how many there will be in the end?
No. As long as they keep selling. I mean, they're selling like, I'm like the fair-haired boy at the publisher now, because publishing business is really hurting, and my books keep going up by 40%. So like they would be very upset if I stopped writing Andy Carpenters. And they're easy for me, I mean, they're really easy. It's all just me talking. Andy talks in the first person present tense, if you read these, and it's like all me talking. In fact, I was saying last night, I wrote Unleashed, which is Andy, and I wrote Dog Tripping, which is literally me talking, back to back. And I was really surprised. It felt like one long book, because it's the same voice, and I didn't realize how identical the voice was. So, no, I mean, I can't say I love writing right now, but the Andy books are easy. I would stop the other ones before I would stop that.
So you said that the publishing houses are hurting for content. Does that mean they're looking for authors?
Publishers?
Excuse me?
I'm sorry, what did you?
You said the publishing houses were hurting for content. Does that mean they're looking for authors?
No, they're hurting for sales.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, yeah. The sales.
Not a dearth of authors then.
No, I don't know. It's pretty hard. You know, you got to find an agent first. That's the key, and that's the only way you can get it to the publisher. But it's pretty tough now.
I have to say that you give a whole new meaning to stream of consciousness. But do you feel totally disinclined to do research?
Zero.
Pardon me?
Zero.
Zero.
Yes.
But that, I guess that would spoil the fluidity of your writing.
Yeah, I don't do any research, and I panic when I get an email from him because he knows. I mean, I don't know anything about legal stuff, and he knows I don't know anything about legal stuff. So one time, I forget the subject, but I wrote something, and he wrote to me, and when I have this guy who's a friend who's a reader originally, and he's one of these talking head legal guys on CNN and Fox and Bloomberg, and he was a former federal prosecutor, now he's a defense attorney, and so if I come up with something, I run it by him to see if it'll pass the smell test, you know, if I can get away with it. So I had something in one of the books, and Vic writes to me, "You can't do that, that's wrong," right? Now, it's too late, of course, the book was out, but that is wrong. So I talked to my friend who said I could do it, and I moderated a running battle between the two of them, and the guy tried to get a Cornell law professor on his side, right?
He was in law school at Cornell, right?
Yeah, and he won. Right? It turned out it was wrong to do, right? So, but no, I don't do any research.
Do you have a writing routine where you do it at a certain time every day or anything like that?
No. Don't misunderstand, my craft is very important to me. You know, I like binge write. Like I haven't written a word of Blackout, and it's going to be due. It's due like in 5 weeks. So I'll probably, you know, so I started a little this weekend, but not much. But so I'll go nuts, and I'll do like 8-hour days.
It could start in a small conference room at a university graduate school program. We've got one or two more questions, and then we'll get Daddy started signing books. Or maybe not. Oh, go ahead. Okay.
I really think you ought to do the audiobooks for your books.
Oh, you know something? Wait a minute. There's a guy named Grover Gardner who does the Andy books. And I've never heard them. I have them, but I must have like a psychological reason that I don't want to hear them. But this guy must be great. Because people write to me how great he is. Every year, including for Hounded, you know, for the last like 6 years, they get nominated for Best Audiobook of the Year, and Unleashed won for Best Audiobook of the Year, right? Now, trust me, the writing is no better in the audio than in print, so this guy must be terrific. So, no, we've emailed. Every time an award comes out, I congratulate him, but... and they asked me if I wanted to narrate dog tripping, but I didn't want to. Yeah, I didn't want to.
My last question is, if you're not researching or, doing a routine, do you think your talent is God-given?
I have no idea. I don't have, as you probably can tell, overwhelming respect for my writing talent. Okay, seriously, it just sort of. If you read my stuff, it's just like me talking, you know, and I don't want to, I don't want to be too self-deprecating about it. I mean, people like it and they sell books, but I never learned a craft, you know. I mean, I started late in life. It sort of just happens. I'm able to write fast because I've never learned to be painstaking about it, you know. So I don't take it really seriously. So I don't know how I get the talent that I have, but I don't. It's not such an awesome achievement. You know. Yes.
Aside from your books, how much time are you devoting towards the Terror Project right now?
Well, once we're in Maine, we don't rescue dogs to place in homes because there's just no need for it. New England is terrific. So we only rescue dogs, like we've rescued 2 dogs in the last 2 months. And one was a golden with cancer, and she's had surgery and she's going to be fine. And the other we just got about a week and a half ago, 9-year-old golden that's blind, mostly blind. And so, like, if a shelter can't place a dog that's old for whatever reason, they come to us. But we don't run the foundation like we did. That was a full-time job. Yes?
Let me get you a mic, please, ma'am.
Do you have acres, and do the dogs form packs with leaders that they accept when you keep accepting dogs like this?
We have 12 acres on a lake, but they're in the house 99% of the time. They sort of don't form packs. I mean, they have special relationships, but they, you know, it's like there's so many, it's like they give up on it, you know, seriously. But the interesting thing is the relationships. Like we rescued 2 dogs, I was in Phoenix for a signing, and there were 2 golden retrievers named Hunter and Tudor that the rescue group brought to me. They're 12 years old to get me to take home to California, which I did. And the dogs looked identical, and they wore bandanas, and one said Hunter and one said Tudor, okay? I get them home, and our dogs decide they don't like the bandana look, and they take them off, Hunter and Tudor. So now, so they lived for 3 more years. We had no idea which was which, and we called them Hunter Tudor, right? But those 2 dogs who had been together their whole life had nothing to do with each other in our house. They camped out in different rooms. They had relationships with the other dogs, but never with each other. So there's like no way to predict. So they form individual relationships, but it doesn't seem to be packs.